Okay, so we're gonna start. Thank you so much for all of you for coming here. Really appreciate you guys being here with us today. So we'll have a session about coastal seas and people, and thinking about how to co-design marine solutions in the context of various important ecosystems, but thinking about the local communities that live in those communities. And so, especially during this COP, there's been a lot of discussion on carbon and Article 6, and a lot of time when the solutions are being proposed, it's important to keep in mind the communities that live there and what are the challenges that they're facing in the context of climate change. And so I'll start by introducing our panelists. So we have Harry Cuchardanto, and he is, maybe you can just come up when you start your presentation. He's a senior director for the program policy and program implementation at RARE in Indonesia. He runs the Fish Forever program and works with communities in trying to develop climate change adaptation initiatives. And we also have Eric Schwaab. He's the Senior Vice President for People and Nature in the Environmental Defense Fund. And he is, has quite of a huge experience in government, working with nonprofits, more than maybe 20 years of experience, and has served as the NOAA in marine fisheries and many other experience. So we're lucky to have both of you here. And introduce myself. My name is Natalia, and I'm a PhD student at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And we'll start with Harry, who's going to talk to us about his work in Indonesia.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalia. Thank you, Natalia. Good afternoon, everyone. It seems that we have so many empty seats here than the occupied ones, but it's okay. So let me start by showing this. Oh, let me introduce myself. So I'm Natalia already introduced me. I'm the senior director for program and implementation in Indonesia. We are running what we call Fish Forever program. Currently, we have focus area in Southeast Sulawesi, but now we are moving to the next 3 provinces in North Sulawesi, Maluku, and North Maluku. RARE itself is actually a US-based NGO, and we have so many countries, one of which is Indonesia. Let me start by showing you this diagram. This is actually what we are seeing or witnessing in Southeast Sulawesi. I don't know if you are familiar with tragedy of the commons. So basically, in our province in Southeast Sulawesi, so many fishers are fishing in the same area, using so many different type of gears at the same time. So it is a typical tragedy of the commons. The fish stocks is depleting very quickly, and also so is the ecosystem. So basically, it is a vicious circle of environmental degradation and poverty increasing. So the more they fish using many different type of fish, including the fishing practices, the more degraded the ecosystem, and the more degraded the ecosystem, the more poor the communities. But it doesn't stop there. So if we see from the climate angle or climate perspective, this is what is happening at the community. So I myself came down to several communities and asked if they feel that climate is changing. What they say is that every month, whose name ended with ber, so like September, October, November, December, normally is wet month. But now, the fish, they cannot predict. And it is very, very interesting when I ask them if they see this as a climate change phenomena. They said, this is our fate. So this is our destiny, you know. basically what they are saying is this will happen in the end, and it will also end in the end. So they don't see that they contribute, and also they could also make a difference. So now we have two big tasks actually, to educate communities about the climate crisis and how they can also be part of the solution for the climate crisis, and maybe also be adaptive to the changing climate. And secondly is how to change the behavior of fishers, so they are more sustainably in fishing, basically. So in 2019, we did what we maybe everyone already knows this, the CCVA, Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment. And you can see here, we at that time we work in 22 sites in Southeast Sulawesi, but then we dropped 5 sites in Wakatobi because we have MOU with the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. So in the end, we have 16 sites in Southeast Sulawesi. So this is the result of our CCVA study. And we learned that we have to, number one, reduce the social and ecological sensitivity in the province. And secondly, increase the adaptive capacities, ecological and social adaptive capacities of the communities. So if you can look at this table here, the strategies that we will use then, among others, for example, encouraging the communities to set aside waters in front of their villages to be used for them to fish, but also delineate small areas to become the no-take zones. We also have strategy to improve the economic, social, adaptive capacity by introducing what we call financial inclusion. I'll be talking about this later, but basically we are educating the communities to save money, because fishers actually, they are not a group of people who don't have money. They have money. Sometimes if they go out for fish, they can come back with maybe like $200. But it will finish in 2 days or maybe a week, because they don't have this saving habit. So we are trying to improve the way they manage and use the income. So this is what we actually try to do. So we introduce this managed access and reserve. Actually, it is based on the TUF principle, territorial use right for fishing principles. So we actually are trying to improve how they fishers, how fishers are fishing, and also use the resources sustainably. One, they have to again set aside waters that they used for fishing. Also, maybe agree on areas inside the fishing ground they would like to protect, and then apply simple harvest control mechanism. So we are encouraging the communities to fish using the right gears, maybe fishing at the right time, fish certain type of fish, and so on and so on. It is not easy because again, they have been practicing the unsustainable practices for generations. So we are trying to educate them slowly the impact of unsustainable fishing practices and why they have to change their practices. So this is what we actually are aiming to do. We are hoping that by adopting this approach, they can be able to protect their ecosystem as well as their livelihood, because they during the rough time and unpredictable rough time, they don't need to fish out far away from the villages. They can just fish maybe close to the villages, and still they can get fish. Of course, we cannot say that they will rely so much on the fish they catch in front of the villages, because in Indonesia actually our fishers they are opportunistic fishers. So if in January is the season for tuna, they will fish tuna. If in April is the season for say groupers, they will fish groupers. So they will change the way they fish depending on the highly economic species in the market. And secondly, they will use multiple gears. So again, in our case, small scale fishers actually are very, maybe I say very complicated fishing actors. Number one, they use multiple gears. They are opportunistic fishers, and they are very pragmatic. So if we ask them to protect the coastal ecosystems, or maybe to set aside area to become a no-take zone, they will ask what will be the benefit for us. If they see the benefit, they perceive the benefit, they will follow. Otherwise, they will not follow. So we have to very carefully ask them, educate the fishers, and maybe also showing the fishers how it works and how it brings benefit to the coastal communities. So this is the concept of managed access and reserve. Again, it is centered around turf principles. In our case, in Indonesia, with the current regulation, we can only allocate 0 to 2 nautical miles of waters. So we cannot go beyond 0 to 2 nautical miles because of the regulation. If the regulation changes, maybe we can have beyond 2 nautical miles. But this is what we actually are asking the community to do. They have to, number one, agree on the area they use for fishing, what we call the managed access area, and then they also have to agree on the area they would like to protect, the no-take zone. Some local people they are familiar with the fish bank. Basically, just like saving money in the bank, you will get interest. So the spillover fish actually is the interest. So they fish the spillover fish that swim around outside of the no-take zone. Then we also advocate the communities to establish a fisher group. And again, this is one solution for the tragedy of the common. A community has to establish a group because it will be easier for a group to be controlled in a sense that the group members can then put like a pressure to the other members if the other members don't follow the regulation. We also then encourage the communities to do the patrolling. Basically, because this is actually quite new concept in Indonesia, because Indonesia is actually a state-owned property regime. So basically, everything is owned by the government. So introducing this concept to the Indonesian government is actually also it has to be very carefully introduced. Otherwise, they will reject from the very beginning. So this is what we are asking the communities to do. They establish a group. They also establish the fishing ground. They establish also the no-take zone. Not only that, in return, because they already do this, they can then have a privileged access. So basically, they can drive away or maybe ask outside fishers to not fishing in the fishing ground. In our case in Indonesia, again because of the political situation and setup, we work with the provincial government and ask the government to legalize, quote unquote, this concept. So the communities that we work with, they have legal status from the government, from the governor, in Southeast Sulawesi to manage the area. And using that decree from the governor, they can then drive away outside fishers from their waters, or maybe ask the outside fishers to get okay from the local fishers to fish in their waters. The approaches actually twofold. Number one is the area-based management tool, and then the second one is fishery governance. So we are again asking the community to establish a group, set aside waters, no-take zone, and so on and so on. We also in some areas we also introduce the financial inclusion. So we give them some trainings how to manage the income wisely. Normally, before we introduce the financial inclusion training, what they are saving actually what is left. So say like they earn maybe like 200 a month. What they are saving is actually what is left in their pocket. So sometimes nothing is left, nothing at all. And now we are changing the mindset. So before they spend the money, they have to set aside maybe, depending on the agreement, maybe 30% of the income to be saved by the household. And when we are talking about communities and how we place communities at the center of our initiative, we actually start engaging the communities from the early on. Even when we, maybe it is cliche when we say that the participation is key here. But the thing is, sometimes we have to do participatory process well. We do not want the communities just to attend the workshop, but we ask them to be active and also educate the communities. If you can see here, even from the very beginning, we have asked the communities to also include women in our PRA meetings, participatory rural appraisal meetings. And it is not easy. So sometimes in our PRA meetings, we also provide toys for the children because sometimes the wife, the reason they do not want to join the meetings because they say they have to take care of the babies and also the children. So we sometimes also bring toys. So the wives, they can come to our meetings and then they just let the kids to play with our toys in the meetings. That is one way we engage the women in our program. So we ask the communities to also include the women, including also when we do the community mapping, understand where they fish normally, what type of fish, and if they see a very good coastal ecosystem, mangrove or coral reef or seagrass bed and so on. So we also ask the wife, and it is very powerful actually because in the discussion normally the wife actually can be a powerful group of people to balance the voice in the communities, in the meetings. This is what we also learn in our program. So we also have a larva dispersal study, and from this map, the yellow dots actually represent the larva dispersal. I think this is for certain species. If I'm not mistaken, this is for crapu or maybe snapper, yeah, grouper or maybe snapper. But if we look to this map alone, in our intention, we would like to just protect the whole coastal in Southeast Sulawesi. But again, because we work with the communities, we cannot do that. So we again basically are asking the communities if we would like to protect your coral ecosystem and maybe also your mangrove, which area do you want to protect? So it is a back and forth discussion. Sometimes it takes more than three discussions. Sometimes even we have to redo everything from scratch because again we need to get the buy-in from the communities. So in the end, we basically of the currently we have this is very interesting. I told you before that they are very pragmatic. From 2019 to 2021, we work with 16 communities. But then neighboring villages, they see that uh, the catch is actually improving in the villages where we work with the communities. Uh, so they are asking if we also would like to help the communities. So currently we have 33 communities, 33 sites in Southeast Sulawesi alone. This is the simple steps of doing of us doing the program. You can see in the left hand side actually the participatory process that we do with community. From the data collection, the PRA, all the way down to the establishment of the fisher group. And then the right-hand side diagram actually showing you the process of getting approval from the governor. So the left-hand side is the work on the ground, and the right-hand side is actually the legal process of getting secure right from the local government. This is the area that we have established in Southeast Sulawesi. So currently we have 33 sites, more or less 305 villages, and it is already 22% or maybe 23% of total coastal villages in the province. The total area you can see that 228,000 hectares, so quite a big area actually. And some of the areas actually are outside the MPAs, and we try to acknowledge those areas to become the OECM. This is just to show you some social indicators based on our household survey that was conducted in 2022 last year. You can, everyone can have the PPT, right? Yeah. You can have the PPT to look at everything in more detail. This is the catch data that we also collect from one site in the province. This is from Mata Oleo, one potential OECM site in the province. Based on this, actually, if I ask the technical team in Indonesia, they say that basically it shows that the catch is stable. So it is a good sign because the community can see and can perceive the benefit of what they are doing. This is the financial and market inclusion update. We have established 93 saving clubs. So again, the most important thing of this initiative is actually to change the mindset. Now they have like this saving mindset. It is very important because once the formal financial institution comes to the villages, they can then move to that formal financial institution, and it will be also good for them to be more resilient during the hard time. So we are hoping that by having this initiative, not only will our communities be more adaptive to climate change or climate crisis, but also the communities to be able to continue their life for many years to come. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harry. That was very insightful. I'm going to share some of the work that I've been doing. This is a very kind of different perspective from a different part of the world where we're working with a women-led fishery. And I'll try to be quick so that we can move into more of a discussion and a Q&A section. And the work that I'm doing is with Afro-Ecuadorian communities. And we're calling this project the New Diaspora, and sort of thinking about how these communities are being displaced in the context of climate change, but other pressures they're facing in their territory. And when working in this part of the world and with Afro-Ecuadorian communities, it's really important to understand how we produce knowledge. And I want to emphasize that in many parts, that we produce knowledge in various different ways. So when we think about science, we tend to develop knowledge from a more of a Western perspective, where the science comes from a very hypothesis, global verification, deterministic models. And a lot of times, in certain places of the world, there's systems that can become, that can actually harm more the communities. And then we have other forms of knowledge, like local ecological knowledge. So this is thinking about more qualitative, oral record. So this is cultural and more local understanding about sort of the daily living of the communities. And these different forms can at times be, there can be certain issues, especially if we are potentially thinking about integrating or how to maintain them in communication. And my work has mostly been looking things through a more dominant science, more Western perspective from how, mangroves are. So I've been doing a lot of work in the kind of carbon biogeochemistry space and how land use changes are impacting. But when we're trying to do work with communities, it's a little bit different. And I want to emphasize that. So the work that I do is at the border with Colombia. So this is an area of conflict. And so when we're in areas of conflict, there's quite more of a complexity. And I want to introduce this concept of complexity. So what you see here is an attractor. So this comes from, or it's referred in the Lorentz equation. So this is kind of, if you ever hear about the chaos theory or the way we think about complex dynamics, where you have different nonlinear dynamics. And so what happens is that you have historical, economical, political, and environmental dynamics that take place, and they form a specific type of attractor. And so that's what you see there. And so these dynamics over time are stable. And so the idea is that if we want to sort of shift the system, how do we change that? And in this part of the world, so we have kind of the cultural and the deep connection of these communities in ancestral territories in this part of the world, but also is located in an area of conflict, and that, there's armed conflict, and that has generated other issues with drug trafficking. And we also have a historical oppression of this community. So there are places there that are, especially oil palm factories are really big in this area. And so a lot of the Afro communities work there. And for them, that has become a form of modern slavery, because they're working where they really don't have basic human rights. And there's other factors associated with land use changes, especially aquaculture. This is major in this part of the world. And, there's many other layers that can make it very complex when we start to think about this. And I want to highlight some work from a scholar from the area. His name is Juan Garcia Salazar. And he worked in this part of the world trying to sort of recover and better understand the history of Afro-Ecuadorians. And so he documented sort of the removal of the communities in ancestral territories. And he kind of argues in his work. So in this part, there's Afro-Ecuadorian and indigenous community. But he argues that in this kind of process of colonization and sort of changing the relationship of the communities with the ecosystem, that the Black people were easy to colonize. And he tried to document memories of his people and oral tradition that were, very threatened. And he has this project called the Vitality Project to kind of understand that relationship of people with the coast and the ocean and rivers. And so he has this, he comes out with this concept of this new diaspora in the context of like economic project with the expansion of mining, aquaculture, and palm oil. These communities have been displaced for their territory. And this has generated a lot of resistance and social movements. And so there are communities that are fighting. And so we need to kind of see things from a more intersectionality approach, sort of understanding the violence, the gender, races, and ecocide. And kind of bringing it again to this idea of complex dynamics, there's a concept called bifurcation. And so it tries to understand what needs to happen so that you can transition the system from one state to another. And there has been work looking at social movements, how this can be important when we try to change the dynamics in a particular place. And so the work that I'm doing is, coming from this more scientific training. How do we build relationship with communities, and how do we develop ethics and do work in a way that is non-extractive for the communities in this part? And so I want to introduce what I mean by colonialists when we think about, and I think it's really important to kind of mention that, especially when we think about places in the global south. And so we can think about colonialism in a way to describe relationships that are characterized by a domination that keeps either land, water, or air available for settler goals. And we need to think this as a structure. This is an ongoing structure. This is not a particular event in time, and that has kind of disrupted our relationships with the ecosystem. And these relationships include a type of knowledge. There's type of knowledge that tend to be value more. When we think about Western science, versus knowledge that tend to be extracted, like indigenous or Black knowledge, and that creates relationships where there's certain groups that tend to be more, have more access and more privilege than others. And so what we should aim to do is that if we have one dominant form of knowledge, that can be very harmful. And so how do we maintain diverse form of knowledge in a way that is just in the context of equity? And so we can think about maybe thinking about anti-colonialist ways to do this. So this is developing a way to describe those relationships in oppositions to systems and practice that tend to be the more dominant. The context of science, we can, so I want to emphasize I'm not calling for decolonial science, because when we think about decolonial, and a lot of scholars and people have sort of, that when we refer to that, that kind of means giving the land back to indigenous communities or people that have been in those territories. But thinking more about how do we develop values that kind of change the way we are thinking. And so, can we identify counter values to dominant structures and do things differently? And Laparson he's a philosopher, and he mentions that science is not a monolith. It's a machine that can always be changing and subvert towards different purpose. So just kind of keeping in change that if we have this sort of dominant structures, we can change them in a way that it kind of addresses issues in the way we want. And so kind of coming back to the work of Juan Garcia Salazar, when I started doing this work, I was thinking about, there is understanding coming from the Afro-Ecuadorian perspective, and, the ways they have understand the ecosystem, the ways they have survived in this part of the world. And, they have a lot of knowledge, and sort of when we think about resilience, and can there be other forms within kind of the Black cosmology to understand how to better address the climate crisis or the environmental issues that these communities are facing. But I wanted to bring back to Nash GC. She's a scholar that has wrote a lot about kind of Black feminists. But one of the things that she calls when there are ideas, especially when there's intersectionality between gender and race, there's a problem when things go mainstream to kind of enrich the knowledge of more, she calls in her work like more kind of when we think about white feminists. And she mentions that what happens is that then the Black feminists or Black understanding end up working more in this service position, where it's kind of more educating. And so we really need to be careful about how we navigate this. And all of us need to understand Black cosmologies, especially if you're not from that part or you don't have those connections. It's just really important to kind of how do we maintain diversity of ontologies. And so the way we've been kind of doing this in Ecuador has been to develop ethics of care. And there's some work by Duncan Yan has been very kind of helpful in sort of thinking about how to navigate this. And so I want to introduce some of the key concepts he mentioned. He talks about he called it this ethics of incommensurability. So there are ways that there's certain things that need to be distinct and they cannot be joined. But it's important to bring those different views into conversation. And so that's kind of the challenge, how to do it in a way that is not destructive. And so when working in places like this, if we want to do something and we understand the power dynamics in place, how do we do things that don't replicate a system that has been harmful for communities, but also thinking about that, if there is kind of this problem of incommensurable goods, that there might be a specific knowledge that, we don't want it to, a lot of times integrating it to another structure can be problematic. And so what we have been doing in Ecuador has been working with this community, especially it's a women-led fishery. So I want to mention that artisanal fishery shellfish in this part are really important for the community. And I use the word concheras, so this is the word in Spanish, but this is the women that kind of harvest the shellfish. And 60% of them are women. And women have played an important role in this part of the world in protecting mangroves. And we've been working with the Mangrove Network. So this is a community collective that formed in 2020. And they have been organizing with different communities in the mangrove forest to better tackle some of the issues they're facing. And so when we did this work, I just want to mention, so it was really important to have the community granted us the permission to enter their space and then identify questions that they care about. And so the community priorities was in the context of the shellfish fishery because it's really important for them, and they have seen that this fishery has changed over time. And so the community particularly wanted to assess the changes of the shellfish fishery over time and space. They wanted to understand how many people were involved in the harvesting, age, and boats, and like what were the pressures, and particularly document other ways of understanding fishery than some other ways that are kind of the more dominant ways that when we think about fishery. And how do we develop recommendations and co-design partnership with universities? And they also wanted to have educational activities, especially they wanted to include more about sort of mangrove ecosystem and how we're educating children, and also about climate change. And I just want to show what the process looked like. So we met with the community and we developed, called it the Mutuo Acuerdo, which is we sat together and we identified what were the expectations of the community, what were the needs, and something that came out in the meetings was really think about transparency, and that they did not want it how to avoid extractive mechanisms, so like coming in, taking their knowledge. And so that was an important discussion of how do we maintain that transparency. And that the members of the community were the key leaders of the project, and that the questions that we were addressing were questions the community care about, and that they also we needed to compensate everybody that was participating, and this was done based on what the key leaders determined was the best way to do it. And finally, the community decides what to do with the knowledge. And so some of the, I'll show you a few kind of message and thoughts from some of the women in the fishery. But I just wanted to say that anything I presented, this has been with the permission from the community. And kind of just want to mention the intergenerationality components. This was really important for the women, because when the women go to harvest the shellfish, they come with their children. And so it was really important to see how that knowledge and that relation between mangroves and how that changes over time. And so I just want to show a few images. So this is Mercedes. She was one of the oldest member in the community, and she has been fighting, especially with the presence of mining and trim aquaculture. And so they're been fighting. I want to say that in Ecuador, there's been like higher rates of deforestation for mangroves. So about 80% of the mangroves have been lost. But in this part of the world, the more northern region, there's been very little deforestation, and that has been because of the women that have been fighting. I also, some of the other important message from some of these women was, a lot of them is in the context of sort of safety and support when they go to harvest the shellfish. They they don't have, if they're pregnant, they cannot stay at home, so they have to go there. So that was one of the dangers for them. They will have like the children in the mangroves, and so they were kind of mentioning how women experience the mangrove different, and that they face way more challenge. Some of the other important message or comments that came up was in the past they were able to harvest about 300 shellfish in a day. Now they collect about 50 in a really good day, maybe 100, but that doesn't happen anymore. And so the cost of a shellfish is about 10 cents. So some of the women make maybe $2 to $3, and they are the primary economic income from the home. So you can imagine how over the years it has become more difficult. And finally, there was this interesting component of gender, of why most of the, why is the fishery mostly women? And so one of the thoughts from this was that, there's this quote from one of the women that, when my mom took me to harvest when I was 5, and then now I take my kids to harvest. And this is not a man's job, because we're here harvesting and we're also being mothers. So kind of thinking again about sort of the challenge when we think about gender in the context of mangroves conservation. And then finally, another big important issue that these communities are facing are racism. So how to navigate that is also really important and a very difficult conversation. And I'm going to skip this, but I just kind of want to acknowledge the community and then some of our other partners for this project. And I kind of want to move into panel and Q&A questions. So first, I just want to invite Eric Schwaab to kind of join us here. And I wanted, if you can kind of start by maybe telling us a little bit about EDF work in the context of kind of conservation and how it's working with communities, especially, that you guys are doing a lot of work in Latin America. And if you could tell us a little bit more about that and what are sort of the challenges, but also some of the challenges when we think about climate change.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. So I'm Eric Schwaab. I'm Senior Vice President at Environmental Defense Fund. My portfolio is people and nature. That includes all of our fisheries and oceans work. It includes agricultural work. It includes natural climate solutions work, including blue carbon, but also avoided deforestation in tropical forests. So we are focused on climate action. We work very closely with local peoples. We work with academics. We work with governments to try to help to generate local solutions to some of our big climate challenges. And when we think about climate challenges, we think about those as challenges, obviously, for mitigation, arresting the climate change that is underway around the world, but we also think about it very aggressively in a resilience context. How do we help local people in local places thrive in the face of the climate impacts that they're already feeling, and we've heard some of those referenced already here. And we very much think about that in a way that centers local people in the solution. So like Harry, we have worked in Indonesia, we have worked in the Philippines, in Humboldt, in Mexico, in lots of other places in the world, really trying to help local people apply local knowledge, apply tenure-based systems like turf systems to better manage their fisheries in ways that help them to survive and thrive in the face of climate impacts. I think the only other thing I would say by way of introduction is we've worked pretty extensively with fisheries reform around the world, and I think one of the things that's really important to note is that we think about both the large, kind of more industrialized fisheries of the developed world, and at the same time we think about the small-scale fisheries such as those we've seen represented here already by Natalia and Harry. It's interesting to note that it's about half and half. So, you know, large industrial fisheries, which have gotten significant attention, catch about, you know, half of, you know, global wild capture fisheries, and small-scale fisheries around the world catch the other half, generally. But that second half makes up 95% of the fishing jobs. Those are disproportionately women in those industries. And they are also places where they're on the where people are disproportionately dependent upon those aquatic foods for livelihoods and for food and nutrition. And so it's really important, in fact, more important in those parts of the world to provide this kinds of program support to help ensure that they can take ownership of sustainable fisheries as one way to fend off these climate challenges. And I'll stop there because I know we're short on time, and I'm happy to engage in whatever conversation I can engage in to help further.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Harry, I just want to invite you if you can sit here, and I just want to ask if we have any questions from the audience.
Actually, I'm Isaac Kabongo. I work with an NGO in Uganda called the Ecological Christian Organization. We work in the Great Lakes region and also the Horn of Africa. You have talked about this component of fisheries. I'm very, very interested in that area because this is one area which has been neglected in many countries, and yet you talked about the issue of livelihoods, but also the issue of nutrition. We have both challenges. In terms of food insecurity, we are facing a lot of hunger and related challenges, but also in terms of nutritional values of the fish, it's really very important, not only for younger people, but even for adults in terms of proteins and all that. Most of the work we have been doing around fisheries resources, we've faced the challenge of overexploitation of the resource, especially around the Great Lakes region, around Lake Victoria, and other small lakes around Tanganyika and all that. So we would be very interested on how to come up with appropriate kind of interventions in order to really look at this resource, because on my side, in a way, it's a little bit neglected. I thank you.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of quick comments. One of the other opportunities that we've been focusing on here over the last 2 weeks is aquatic foods. And we talked yesterday morning in a different session about the Aquatic Blue Foods Coalition, which has been working globally to put the important role that aquatic foods play for people around the world into the global foods discussion. The second thing we know about aquatic foods is that they're, as I said already, disproportionately important to some of the most sort of challenged coastal communities around the world. So we've really got to focus there for some of the reasons you described around nutrition and livelihoods. And the other thing, from a climate perspective, fish is the most carbon efficient animal protein we produce. And you go beyond fish into shellfish and seaweeds, and they are beyond carbon efficient. They are nature positive. They are often leading to additional carbon uptake and sequestration. They're providing habitat values within these coastal waters and all sorts of benefits like that. And the last thing I would just say, from a perspective of management in a situation like Lake Victoria, that's exactly what Harry was talking about. And one of the things that EDF works on is how do you introduce or advance tenure-based rights to get beyond this sort of common access fishery that just simply drives down the fish population to the point that nobody benefits. And so if you have a more sustainable approach where the incentives associated with fishing are aligned with the incentives associated with long-term conservation and sustainability of the core stock on which these depend, that's a solution set that really helps in local communities, and that's where you get to these territorial use reserve systems. We call them in the U.S. catch shares, and they work in all kinds of contexts, but it's really about aligning the interests of the fishermen and the interests of the fishing communities with the long-term sustainability of the resource.
Just to add to that, in Indonesia, in Southeast Sulawesi alone, more than 90% of the fishers in that province actually small-scale fishers. So you can see if we are unable to help those fishers, actually we are not able to help the communities in that province, and that's why we are focusing on small-scale fishers. Secondly, fish is the only source of protein for coastal communities. And it is not surprising in Southeast Sulawesi, stunting can also be found in coastal communities. They fish fewer fish, and then they just sell everything to the market. And then when they earn money, they just buy instant noodles. And that's why the protein intake is very low. And that's why with this approach, the turf reserve and territorial use fisheries for communities, we are actually changing the way they manage the resources. The concept of tenurial is not common in coastal communities because the fish actually can swim around everywhere. And that's why we are trying to introduce this concept, so they have their source of life and also source of income in front of their villages. And I have to say that our approach works really well for demersal fish, for reef fish. It won't work for pelagic fish, fish that fish beyond 4 nautical miles, like tuna or like that big fish. So it works well with demersal fish, but again, because in case of Indonesia, the thing with fishers in Indonesia, they are once again opportunistic fishers. Sometimes they fish groupers, sometimes they fish snappers, sometimes they fish tuna. So they fish all the way down to 20 maybe nautical miles from their village. So they go far away, but there are some times in a year they will rely on their own waters, and that's why this approach is recognized and also accepted by the communities.
And just to be clear, it's not necessarily that RARE or EDF has to come to these communities and teach them these approaches, because there are, coming back to Natalia's framing, there are places from Hawaii to Chile to all over Southeast Asia where local communities have a long history of sustainably self-regulating in their communities. And in fact, in some ways, the concept of like catch shares and what Harry and I have described came out of those communities first, and then were adopted to some of the larger scale fisheries, even in the US, where we now have catch share systems that are built on that model.
We can go, yes, yeah. Go to questions.
Thank you so much. My name is Kathleen. I'm from Singapore. I had a question for each of you. Pak Hari, it was really interesting to hear about the managed access and reserve sites and the addition of the financial inclusion model. So RARE being a global organization, I was wondering how that feeds back into the global network and how you bring those learnings back and whether there's replication in other places in the world. And then Eric, us being a smaller grant maker in Southeast Asia, it'd be really interesting to kind of understand what are some of the projects you're looking at in Southeast Asia, whether it was in the fishery space or in the NCS space. I know that's a lot for the few minutes that's left, so whatever you can pack in there would be amazing. Thank you.
Let me be quick with financial inclusion in the sites that we work. So again, once they have this financial habit, they know how to save money and so on. Once they are introduced to the formal financial institution, they already have that kind of mindset. Some of our communities actually are now becoming local bank agent, the branchless bank agent. So I don't know if you're familiar with this concept. In some of our national banks, they have this concept of branchless bank agent. So they are actually a bank, but they don't have office in the communities. So they act like a branch of the bank in the communities. And it is. We have 1 minute. Yes, I know.
I'd like to get something in.
Yes. And it is the thing that we are actually trying to do. So they already have that mindset, and maybe like 1 or 2 years down the line, they already becoming that kind of communities. One more thing, Eric. So in RARE itself, actually we are trying to now move one step in advance. So we are introducing what we call impact bond model. Financing for coastal communities, inviting investors, and then like using the money for the coastal communities.
So just very quickly, and on that knowledge sharing piece, let me give a plug for the Small Scale Fishers Hub, which EDF participated in building with a number of other organizations, and it provides resources to small scale fishers and to local fishers all around the world. It's translated into 20 different languages, so those resources are available, and it has a real-time translation function so that a fisher in Indonesia can speak to one in South America. So Small Scale Fishers Hub is a great resource in that regard. We work on fisheries specifically in this context in Philippines and in Indonesia. And we have several different contexts in which we work in Indonesia, and we're increasingly interested in, mangrove and salt marsh and seagrass systems as an important part of not just a blue carbon dynamic, but one that delivers coastal protections, that delivers enhanced habitat, for some of these inshore fisheries and the like. And so there's lots more we could talk about, but I know we're out of time.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for all of you for coming and your questions. And yeah, if you want to chat, we'll be here after. But thank you. Have a great day.